successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. I have a terrific guest today. I've known him for a while. He's in my industry. He's a very creative, terrific person. His name's Christian Giordano, and he is the president, co-owner of Mancini Duffy, an amazing architectural firm. He's known for clients like HBO, ESPN, Disney, and now Netflix. And I love entertainment, so I would love to be in and around working with those type of companies as well. It's fun. Started his career in 1998, and then he joined Mancini Duffy in 2013, named president in 2014, and then became the majority owner in 2017. And, you know, if you just look at this topic, the myth of overnight success, you know, that took many, many years to actually make that decision. And probably, and we're going to talk about it, have the courage to actually take on that type of role. He has an amazing podcast called the Anti-Architect Podcast. And we both discuss new ways to create our audience. He has a much bigger audience than me. So
I don't know about that.
Thanks for doing this podcast. But welcome, and really thank you for being on. I appreciate it.
John, thanks for having me, man. As you said, we've known each other for a long time now. I do consider you a mentor, whether you know it or not. You know, we have a lot of phone conversations, and we've met up a lot of times, and obviously we're in the same industry, do a lot of work together. But you've always been sort of a guiding force where you kind of tell me how it is, and you'll say, why are you doing it that way? Don't do it this way. Do it this way. Don't do it that way. You know, you're also one of the reasons why I went into that organization, Young Presidents Organization, YPO, kind of telling me all about it, and sort of an inspiration to get in there, which has truly changed my career trajectory along the way. So I thank you.
Thank you. Wow. I'll take that. Good way to have we're taping this on a Friday, so it's a good way to go into the weekend. I appreciate that. So, all right. Listen, obviously you are where you are now, but it takes so much to get there. So as we all know, when we're growing up as a young person, you know, all the little things that affect us, that create the triggers of our adult life, and the things that actually spur us and pivot us in directions that really make us what we are today. I'd love to first ask you, like, can you describe yourself growing up? Maybe, you know, describe what your parents thought about you growing up, and just, you know, young Christian, like, what was young Christian like?
So to go way back, young Christian was actually, and I don't really talk about this much, but young Christian was actually left back in second grade. And it's something that honestly, in a weird way, bothers me to this day. And I can't explain why it bothers me. It really shouldn't. But I do think that was a big turning point in my life, right? I was dyslexic, learning disabled. I had to go to special reading classes. I had to go to special work with people for like hand-eye coordination. Really, when I look back, totally bizarre things, because I turned out to be a good athlete. I turned out to be an avid reader, all of those kind of things. But early on, I could not work in school. I couldn't comprehend things in school. I couldn't stay focused in school. I probably would have been on medication if it was these days now. But I will tell you this, one thing that my parents did that I try to make sure I remember every single day with my own kids is that my parents told me that I was the best, no matter what. And that people didn't know what they were talking about. They didn't know how to educate me, and that I could still be a success, whether I was left back in second grade, whether I couldn't read. And that always kind of stuck with me along the way. And it was it's something that has inspired me, I guess, to kind of prove them correct. Right. There's that burning desire, this grit inside of me that has said, okay, well, maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Maybe I'm not the guy that's going to get the best grades or all this stuff's going to come easy to me. But I realized I had to work really, really hard. So if I have to work 3 or 4 times harder than the average person to get an average grade, I know I have to work 10 times harder. And that, and growing up, my father worked nonstop. He was but he was definitely different than me. He was super smart, remembered everything, and he worked nonstop. I can remember sort of passing by. He worked in the city, and then ultimately more locally. And there was this building he worked in, and you'd pass by with my mom, and the light would be on in his office, right? Like he was always working. And that definitely stuck out with me too. So kind of fast forward into high school, something clicked for me at some point where I realized, okay, I may not be the best student, but I have a decent personality. I seem to get along with everybody. And I learned how to almost effectively sell myself to teachers and friends. When I look back at it, and I was kind of friends with everyone. I was friends with the cool kids. I was literally friends with the football player, someone you and I know that went to the NFL. And I was friends with the dorky kids, right? And the weird artsy kids, right? And I was able to kind of find my way that way. I was also able to get really good grades by working really hard. So I would work all hours of the night. I would get up early. I did all of that sort of stuff. I became the captain of the swim team. And just through that work alone, somehow I was able to get myself into a good school. I always knew from early on I wanted to be an architect, though. Always.
That's amazing.
And so that's been always a guiding force.
So what I love about that, what inspired me to do this podcast, amongst a bunch of things, but was the movie Rudy, and seeing that, no one really realizes what that last success that you have took to get there. And in most stories, people only see like what's happening at the moment, not all the grit and the problems and the controversies and all the adversity people have to deal with. So you had it at a very young age. And so, and listen, if you look at even like Tom Cruise had dyslexia, like there's so many successful people that, had the young challenges and became this huge success. So knowing that you did get through that, and knowing that you said you always wanted to be an architect, obviously you have a creative mind, right? And you went to college and you studied it and you did all those things. And you started out, I guess, at 2 other firms before you got to be where you are today. What made you want to own a firm? Because like being creative and managing people are 2 completely opposite parts of the brain. Why would you even want to take that on? Because, and my question also, do you feel less creative in your everyday world because of all those managerial tasks?
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question right off the bat, I am definitely less creative than I've ever been, because I'm so focused on the business and the people aspect of owning a firm. But I do get to dabble in architecture when we have a big project like a Netflix, which we could talk about later. I do get involved in that. I try to see at least what's going on. I need to know what's happening with every project. I need to be able to speak to the client about it. And then if I see something kind of going in a direction I don't necessarily love, I'd love to course correct and get in there on that. But it's taken me 10 years also to hire the right people.
Yeah.
So that makes a huge difference. But kind of going back, right?
Go ahead, yeah.
On the, wanting to own a firm. When I worked at 2 great firms. I worked at a firm called Swanky Hayden Connell, which is a big architecture firm in Soho in New York. We worked on some really amazing large projects. Most importantly, it's where I met my wife. And we had a lot of fun at that firm, just in general. And then I went to a firm called HLW, an amazing, very large firm with international offices. I spent a lot of time in Shanghai, China, and designing these crazy projects, some that actually got built, some that, were so silly they'd never get built, right? And all the while I was there were things about those big firms that I knew that if I could, again, kind of, I guess it's going back, I've never really thought of it this way, going back to my childhood, right? Getting along with kind of all different kinds of people and being able to interact with them. There were things that were done at those firms that I thought, if I ever owned a firm, I could really improve on the experience, not only for the client, but also for the people that work in at the firm. Architecture, interior design is a tough business, right? I mean, we're in the business of selling hours, and every hour that's sold gets put on a timesheet and gets billed to a client theoretically. And, that's a tough business, a pure service business. And so it can be grueling, right? There's always more drawings you can do. There's always more designs you can think through. I had a lot of ideas about technology and how to advance that. I had a lot of ideas about culture and how to advance that. And I was also at that point bringing in a lot of work for the company that I had worked for, HLW. And again, they're an amazing firm, and I still have some very close friends there. But I was getting bored, and I thought to myself, well, maybe this is the opportunity. Maybe this is where I go out on my own and I start. And I had a lot of freelance projects. Architects moonlight a lot, and I did apartments, I did houses, I did things like that, some small office work. And I thought, all right, well, if I could just kind of maintain my life and do those small things, I could probably get by and just build it from there. But the reality is, I didn't want to work on apartments. I didn't want to work on that kind of stuff. I mean, they're fine as sort of supplementary income, but they just weren't they weren't exciting to me, right? I like the big stuff. And so, this opportunity at Mancini came along where the Ralph Mancini himself came in, and they were looking for a young guy in their 40s to take over the firm. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. Let me meet with them. And I actually met with them. And I wasn't confident enough in myself to take this on. But they slowly convinced me that, well, it could work. And we were probably about 35 people when I joined the firm, maybe 40 tops. And I was able to kind of get in there. And, little by little, I was able to realize, like, okay, wait, they're going to let me make these decisions for the firm. They're going to let me actually make this my own place. And from there, I realized something about myself, is that I had a tolerance for risk that I didn't think I had, right? And that I was willing to kind of go all in on this particular firm and make this my own place. That this was an opportunity I was essentially being handed, even though it was kind of a mess. But I could make it my own place. And from there, we started winning a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there. And the staff changed over, and I brought in some of the right people, and up and up and up, things kind of kept moving in the right direction, to the point where, there was a conversation I had with the current owner, or the previous owner, I said to him, what's your plan to retire? And he very gruffly said, well, no one's ever made me an offer. And I thought, okay, well, here's my door. This is where I'm going to come in. And the next day, I came back with a way I was going to buy him out over a period of 5 years. I was going to pay him on a monthly basis. And we went through a valuation process. He was very fair about kind of what he wanted and how I could do it. And I outworked and worked, and I paid for this firm, with my own money. There was no gifting of stock. I mean, he wanted his payout, and little by little, I paid him out over 5 years, all the while realizing, well, A, this is a great opportunity, and B, wow, I can actually do this. I do have the confidence to do this. I do have the ability to do this. And strangely enough, I have a tolerance for risk that I didn't think was there.
It's funny because you didn't think it was there, but, the risk of going back to school when you were a kid, knowing and thinking that you might be someone that couldn't learn, but yet you still showed up. And, I think so. So where do you feel the courage came from? You said you didn't know, but you still did it. Where did that come from? I mean,
That goes back to the root of my parents, right? Giving me that confidence all the while, saying, "No, you're just as good as everybody. You're better than everybody. You can do this. There's nothing you can't do. Look at how great you are. You know, you're awesome at that, and look what you've already accomplished. You went from, being barely swimming to being the captain of the swim team. You know, you went from being at the bottom of the class to, I mean, I wasn't certainly at the top of the class, but let's say in the middle of the pack, right? Or maybe even a little the upper head of the upper part of the pack, right? By the time I had graduated high school, I went to the University of Miami in Florida. I graduated there with a architecture school. It was actually easy for me. I got an architecture degree, a Bachelor of Architecture. I had made some great connections there. I always wanted to work for this star architect, Frank Gehry. And so I went out to UCLA and went to graduate school there. And so, when you look back, you go, hey, wait a minute, I have a graduate degree from UCLA. I maybe I'm not as shabby as I thought I was, or, I kind of moved out to LA. I remember my parents were like shocked, right? I had never done a sleepover as a kid. And then one day I told them, I got into UCLA and I'm moving to Los Angeles. And they were like, okay. And I just moved there on my own, no problem, and somehow figured it out. So again, it's just figuring it out, working through whatever the issues are and working harder.
I love it. So, and it's funny because again, we don't ever look back and say like, what did we do as a young person into our early career that gave us this courage to do things to actually grow our careers later in life. So you did it, you joined, and listen, they inched you along, which is terrific, right? Like they must have felt you were definitely a candidate for them to actually make this happen. So you you worked there for a year, then you finally take over. What was the challenges? Because up until then, you were being this creative architect, doing the things that you do, working on stuff you felt, was important to you. What were the challenges those first 2 years? Like, because now it's game on, dude. Like right. This is real, right? So where'd you go from there?
Yeah, I mean the challenges are, it's funny. This is the podcast about the myth of overnight success. I would argue I'm not quite sure I'm successful yet. I'm working toward it, but definitely, it's I can see it down the road. But I don't want to ever call myself a success until I've really realize maybe that'll be at my retirement party, right? That kind of thing, right?
Well, you need, but, and this is very important because I don't think anyone successful actually thinks they're successful. And I don't care who you are, you might get a lot of, accolades, but like the inner selves always feels we need to do more.
Yeah.
But I do believe to be in flow, you need to celebrate successes. Like,
yes.
Because the end means we're gone. Like what end is there, right? Except you're not here anymore. So, and you should be proud of those, just like your mother kept telling you, you are the best, you can do this. And
yeah,
you look at any athlete, or anybody that's really successful, they have these little micro goals, right? Each day that they could come home and feel they can be, look at themselves as being a success. So I know you agree with that.
Oh, absolutely.
You're just being humble.
No, but absolutely. And I to divert there, we'll go back to your other question. There are things that happen along the way that really make me proud, right? People within the company will send notes or clients will send notes. There was someone, we were kind of doing an analysis of our brand, and some people, clients and some staff, they wrote some really nice things about us and about me in particular that honestly were heartwarming. And those are the kind of success, those are where I do feel successful, right? We do this thing in the office monthly. We have a all-in town hall. We call it T3. It's a kind of a weird reason why it's called T3, but it's always focused on, I share everything at the business. We share the finances, we share the sales, we share the good, the bad, the wins, the losses, you name it, we share it. I share my goals. every year I share my personal goals and the business goals. My personal goals sometimes are so embarrassing. I can't believe I'm actually, showing them to 100 people.
Well, you're human. It's showing you're human.
That's right. But
We
then
all are.
but at those events, that's where I do feel success, right? I can feel the energy in that room, right? And I do sometimes, and some of them will hear this. Sometimes I go in the back. I think about this as I'm leaving. I go, wow, holy crap, I created this, or me and my partners. I don't want to, I do have some great partners, and
Yeah.
we created this, right? This is our thing, and sometimes there's so much energy and love and positivity in those rooms. That's where I really feel the success. Or going to a project that we've done and it's, the client loves it, and it wins awards, even though awards aren't super important to me. Those are the kind of things where I go, wow, this is amazing. Like, look what we did. Like, how the hell did we do this? A bunch of idiots.
Well, you're giving some great points, though. I mean, people want to feel a part of something. I always say, when you feel like you own your job or your position or your place in anything, it could be a sports team, a business, a nonprofit, anything that you feel what you're doing is bigger than you and that you're included. Like, you actually feel that people, respect that you're there. Magic happens, right? So obviously that's some of the traits and characteristics that you portray. How many people now are employed at Mancini Duffy since that 40?
Yeah, so we're 100 today. On January 1, we will be 130. We have acquired a firm in Tampa, Florida, and they will be joining us. It's essentially official. We'll be announcing it then, and so we'll be 130 people with 6 offices now around the country, which is great. And I want to go back to your other question about
Challenge. Yeah.
what were the challenges in the beginning, right? I had never, again, I went from a designer that was running architectural design studios, doing interiors projects, doing out of the ground buildings. I was the designer, right? I was the design director, the designer, the senior designer, all the way down to the junior designer at some point. And that's kind of all I knew. I sat in front of a computer or with a hand sketch and I designed. And then all of a sudden I was thrust into this, hey, you're now an owner of a business and you're responsible for all these people. It was 40 people, then growing and growing. And we were always over 65 people, right, pretty much right away as we kind of started to win new work. And I think the challenges were emotionally thinking, well, oh my God, I'm responsible for all of these people, their paychecks. Some of them take care of kids. Some of them take care of their grandparents. Sometimes that can be really overwhelming to think like, oh my God, like I actually am responsible for all of these people. And my number one job is to make sure that they get paid. I did at that point join YPO, which was amazing. And so getting into a group that could help with those issues about what you face as a leader and how to truly lead a group of people, not emotionally get involved with them, where it's kind of in the way, but being able to connect with people and being able to do my job as the owner and leader of the firm, and also relinquish responsibility. I think that was probably one of the hardest things that I could do as a leader is, and I still suffer from this today, I want to do everything. And I know that is impossible to do. And I also know that's demotivating to people. I don't want to be a micromanager. I never wanted to be micromanaged myself, but it's really hard. And this, to not want to jump in and say, you know what, I'll just do that. Or you need to let people make mistakes along the way and tell them like, hey, it's not a big deal. I've made this mistake before. Maybe we could try it a different way next time. Or wow, that was an amazing idea. I wouldn't have done it that way. I'm so glad you did it that way, right? So those little things along the way. And I've had now the same core leadership group for the last 10 years. They have grown with me. And I guess, going back to what's a success, that is a huge success, right? That leadership group has stayed. They see the vision. They see the long career path. I never once think that any of that core group is going to leave. where I used to fear that in the beginning, like, oh my God, what if this person leaves? I won't be able to handle that. I'll take it so personally. I don't worry about that stuff anymore. We're a cohesive group moving forward. Everyone's involved in all of the decisions now, where before maybe I was just kind of making rogue decisions and then was sort of told by some of the staff, like, hey, probably should have involved some others on that in that decision. I was like, oh, duly noted. I will not make that mistake again. Thank you so much. So little by little, we cleaned up the back end of things. We got some processes in place. We got people really defined what they do, what their job is, which was, hard to do. And then it was clear as to what my job was, which was to go out and win business, meet clients, and steer the firm in the direction that we all kind of agreed was the way to go.
That's amazing. I love the fact you understand. Listen, if it's life or death and we were doctors, performing an operation, no, you can't make a mistake. That's not a learning process, unfortunately, when it comes to life and death. But I feel the same way. Like mistakes, or failures, if you look at them as that's the lesson you need, and it's not like what we feel failure in society is, which is that you're a loser. You're like if we would just change the whole definition and I don't even like the word failure anymore. I wish we could change the name, and those should be called lessons.
Yeah.
Like we say, oh, failure is a lesson, but why do we have to have the word failure in it? And when you can let go and know if there is one, that's going to be just like you at 2 years old had to deal with what you had to deal with. When someone feels that feeling and has to get through it and work,
yeah,
and they have to figure it out and they have to talk about it and feel and knowing they never want that to happen again. If no one lets that happen, they're not going to grow as individuals. So it's good that you learned that lesson. I don't think you can scale without it. I think it's absolutely an impossible task.
Totally agree.
So, all right. So now you're going to be at this 160. I know obviously that's a new number and yet a new firm coming, but obviously your work is growing. But in architecture, Mr. Anti-Architect, it's still so hard. We still wait so long. What is immersive? How are we going to fix the scalability and the flow of projects? Not that everything's not great and the people we work with are amazing, right? But how do we change this? I know you have this tool belt or this immersive technology thing, and you are the anti-architect wanting to make this better. So where do you see this going from here? And is this years away, or is there going to be something created that actually makes the flow of business better?
Yeah, I think that's actually an exciting time for all of, what we would call, the real estate and construction world, right? Which I think architecture and interior design in on. It's a world that is very slow to adapt, right? There are technologies out there. There are ways of doing pre-manufactured buildings or pre-manufactured components. But at the end of the day, it's always cheaper and faster to throw up some drywall and boom, you've got the box that you need, right? And so, but the technology is kind of beginning to catch up. So it's an exciting time in that there's robotics, there's 3D printing in the actual construction world. There's ways of making sure that what is drawn is actually built correctly. There's ways of analyzing things that so that by the time you get to the construction end, there's no more conflicts and things go smoother. There's ways of pre-assembling things now for cheaper and better quality. So all of that is beginning to catch up.
And how about this? I'll give you an example. Just because AI is on the scene, right? Yeah. And I'd like to talk about that. Yeah. So, even with my podcast, if I uploaded the last 3 podcasts into one of these platforms and said, I'm having you on, please give me the 10 best questions that match all the questions that I do on my podcast, find all the research on this person that's out there and give me backup to each question as if they answered the question.
Yep.
And I'm on it, I can get that in 30 seconds. Where are we with, here's a program from a tenant for 150,000 square feet. We know what they want. Why can't I get that rendering back in 30 seconds?
So you can. There are programs out there, right? There's a floor plan AI program out there that you can feed in.
But is this happening? Like, because I
It
like
is
we're
happening. The issue right now with some of it is that, especially on the, well, let's talk about the floor plan stuff, right?
okay.
There's floor plan things where let's say you had a 200,000 square foot interior space and you wanted a space plan it. You, as Jonathan Schultz, could go in there and say it needs 45 private offices, 10 by
Right.
12, it needs conference rooms, it needs open space, it needs, give me 300 versions of it. And it'll spit out 300 versions of it. Now, where it falls short and where we need to make sure the accuracy is first of all, what's its starting point? Are the floor plans that you uploaded 100% correct, right? Or because if they're off by an inch, right, and then that's compounded over, 200 feet, you have a problem when you get to construction, right?
Yeah.
But for an initial idea, those are amazing, right? Do all those offices fit? Probably, right? It's pretty darn close. Now, you then have to worry about the legality side of it, right? The proper egress. Are the toilets correct? And some of these programs are beginning to figure all of that out. But there's so much subtlety in every jurisdiction, right? Every city is different.
Remember, all this is public information. So my question to you, right? Because like, will an owner for that part of the process, like where are we going just to make everyone's life easy? I know it's your livelihood to do those plans, but are you like, would your firm give up that work to be able to make a project go faster? And is that product coming?
1,000%. I think by the end of 25, you'll see architects and even you as the end user, right, or as the owner, using those products for sure. There's a bunch of them out there. I think we're all testing them in different ways. And I think, honestly, we'll use them as a service for our own selves. I would love to get 200 versions of a floor plan and not waste, 6 weeks going back and forth with showing you all those different options. That's part of what our software is about. The Toolbelt software is, in fact, it's a way of making decisions. That's really all it is. We're able to take a 3D model, the Revit product, basically reduce the polygon count, push it directly into a VR and AR system, and then everyone can put on those goggles, whether it's a virtualized version of it where we do it over a Zoom call or a Teams call, or you actually come into the office, you put on some headsets, or we can bring it to site now because the headsets have gotten so powerful, and we can do it right on site. We can make those decisions now immediately. So instead of saying to you, I always say I can do what a normal architect does in 3 weeks, we can do in 3 hours, because we can have all those versions uploaded, and they can be all sketchy. And we put on those goggles and we iterate through those things. And 3 hours later, we walk out and we have a rough design. And so now it's not this process where, hey, I'm going to show you a layout. I'm going to take a week to refine it. I'm going to show you another layout. I'm going to take a week to refine it. And this goes on and on and on. That's where architects lose money, is we just keep drawing things over and over again. We may not be listening to the client, right? We may have our own things that we want to accomplish in there. So the software does that for us, right? It gives, you make decisions right then and there, and then we go off and we roll with it. That's why we're able to do restaurants, smaller interior projects super fast now because of this. We can speed those timelines up by 6 weeks, right? That we can cut it in half, essentially. We do wonder jobs from start to finish. Wonder is a restaurant.
Yeah, Mark Laurie was on our podcast.
I know he was. Yeah. So we do Mark's work, and we can get a restaurant done, an entire restaurant done in 12 weeks, like from design through construction, because we can just iterate these things, right? We have all the parts and pieces now. We put them in VR, we put them in this process, and bam, right to the contractor, and the thing is being built. So I think you're going to see that compounded in the next year, because the AI programs are more reliable, right? It'll give the architects the confidence to use them. I'm not super worried that, hey, it's going to be a click of a button and the architect's job is eliminated. That may come. It may frankly come. I think we have a long while for that. But I think
no one wants anyone not to be involved, because as an architect, you have a lot of creative thoughts that maybe I won't have as an owner of a building, right? and like I want to go and do what I want to do to create value for what we need to do in our business plans and our goals.
I'll give
So
you another example, though, real quick. The image generation that AI does, right? Using some of the bots to create images. We now use those 1,000% for everything we do when we show a client for inspiration. We no longer search the internet.
so which one do you use? What, do you use Sora? Which one do you use?
Yeah, we honestly, we use all the Midjourney is probably the best one that we use. A little bit more complicated. You really have to know how to use the prompts. It's done through Discord.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more complicated. We have some experts in our design lab that are really good at those prompts. I think you'll see, architects really the educational system shifting over to being able to prompt things, right? You just like ChatGPT, you have to ask it the right question, and eventually you learn that right question to ask it that's better suited for you.
And I think pretty soon it's going to know what the right question is on its own. It's funny. I was using this image generation last week. I was like, give me an office building with a waterfall coming out the side. And then I started adding things to the building and I felt like I was my own little creative self, which, as an owner, you still have creative juices because obviously we want it to be what the user wants, but also create something nice for the community. It was fun that I was able to be creative in that way, in this little teeny way. Would you ever put a waterfall on the side of a building? No, but it actually looked pretty cool. Like so good. So I hope our industry adopts this. I think you're going to have no choice. And I think you're going to have to apply yourself in different ways to create revenue. Because, some of the menial jobs that we create revenue today are going to go away. So, like, how else do you think about adding value to what you do in your whatever industry you're in, right? I think we're at the crossroads of that.
Yeah, here's a great example too on the checking of drawings, quality assurance. We now through Bluebeam can use AI to actually analyze all of our drawings and then give us a list of what are the common mistakes we're seeing, people that are doing the technical drawings in our office. What are the common mistakes that they're making? And it'll create a dashboard for us, right? And now we know to A, look out for those things, and B, where people need some additional learning, right? If everyone's making the same mistake over and over again, A, maybe we didn't teach them correctly, or B, maybe we were actually doing something wrong. And how can we correct that? And now that's kind of a closed and shut thing, and we can move on. It'll just improve the end product for everybody.
I love it. I mean, think about that. I mean, Grok or, Elon Musk's product is like probably the preeminent MRI reader right now. Same thing, like diagnosing people. You don't want to make mistakes, right? You don't want false positives, right? So that people go home and they freak out. And then 2 weeks later, you're like, thank God. But this can be applied to so many things. And it takes innovative people like yourself, thank God, in our industry to actually try them. Because like we already have jobs, right? And like to implement a new process, it just takes so much. And again, you have to be able to have people within your organization also want to buy in. So what's the challenge of that? Because I know you and I we're almost addicted to like new things and technology and change and how can we do something better? But that's not really always the case within organizations. What's that challenge of getting people to get around that mindset?
Well, I think because we have focused so heavily in the last 10 years on the fact that we are a technology-based architecture firm, right? That's in our tagline. We've created what we have. We have an R&D lab. We have 2 full-time programmers that are developing software. One of our pieces of software is actually patented. So it's ingrained in our culture that we are going to move this industry forward, just like the Anti-Architect podcast, right? It's like, what do we do? What do we do great in architecture? What do we not do great? Where do we see things that need to improve? So the culture in our firm is that of we need to improve this profession. We need to be able to spend more time with our families. So if we can find a technology and we can invent a technology that doesn't exist, that checks our drawings better, that improves our process, that does some of the mundane things that we do over and over again. If interior design, we design the same pantries in corporate interiors, over and over and over again. And we redraw it and we redraw it and redraw it. Why isn't there an algorithm that can just fit the pantry that we know works in hundreds of buildings? Why can't it just fit in that space, right? So we're working on things like that. And I think when you have that culture that we want to advance it and that it's a positive thing rather than it's, hey, we're taking the tradition out of this, it really makes a huge difference. There are definitely people within the firm that are, let's say, a little bit more black and white, and I like the way it used to be done. I joke with my partner; he can always be that, right? He always says he's the anvil to my balloon, right? Because sometimes I'm off. I'm like, we should do this, we should do that, and he's like, relax, we still have some practical things to do. We're not there yet. So if you create
being early sometimes isn't good either, right? Like I've learned that I got so early in on real estate technology, and none of it wasn't working. Like it looked good, and shiny new objects always look good, but the actual practical applications was too early, and it wasted a lot of time. So, yeah. but on the other hand, you don't want to not keep trying things because it's easy to say, well, it's not ready yet either. So it's a balance. You got to find the balance, which the anvil and the balloon is a very good analogy. So it's amazing. So, all right. I always like to find some interesting things that I actually never knew about guests and have them explain like why. So like, what started you from, creating edible art cakes? I mean, I've known you for a long time. The fact that you have not told me that you are an expert in edible art cakes.
Yes.
I have no idea why. So
I've retired from that profession. No, it all started.
First of all, what is an edible art cake?
So one of those cakes you see on TV, right? The Cake Boss and that kind of thing.
But the TV shows where they come in and they like compete against.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, we watch those. Those are actually fun.
Yeah,
those are
so
great.
I started doing when my first daughter was born. That was probably right around the time that Ace of Cakes and Cake Boss were popular. And I remember watching those shows and thinking, this is just like architectural model making. I was really good at making architectural model making, clay, wood structures, more advanced things, casting things. And I figured I could do this. And plus, when you really look at those people's cakes, the detail was terrible. So it always just annoyed me that they were so popular. And so I said to my wife, I'm going to start making our kids birthday cakes. And then that evolved into, I wanted to do more and perfect it because it turned out it's actually a lot harder than it looks on TV. Surprise.
Right. Exactly.
And so I started doing birthday cakes for all, everyone around the same time was having their kids, and you go through that whole thing. And so I was making birthday cakes for everybody's kids, and it just became a thing. Like, oh, Christian's going to make your kids 1-year-old birthday cake. Then it became the 2-year-old. I did it all the way until like a lot of the kids were like 10. Then they stopped really caring. So I'm thinking about coming out of retirement for my daughter's 16th birthday, though.
Yeah, you got to come out of retirement. I'm turning 60 if you can believe it in January. So
nice.
Maybe you'll come out of retirement for that for me.
I've done buildings for clients for openings, stuff like that. I mean, it's silly, but
it's not silly. It's great. It's amazing that you do that. And then, okay, so you're busy enough, and people say this about me with this podcast. Like, what made you create the Architect podcast? Like, why would you even think that would matter? How'd you come up with the name? Why are you still doing it? And just give us a reason.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, like right in 2020, and a little bit before, actually it was before the pandemic, we had hired an executive coach to kind of work with our leadership team. And one of the things that came up was that, Christian, you need to be out there more. You need to have your own brand, and you need to put your thoughts out there, and maybe you should write articles, and maybe you should publish, some short papers on some things. And my thought around that was, I just can't see myself sitting down and writing an article about my thought. I'm better talking. I'm better interacting with people. And honestly, it was our friends, brand groupies, Carrie and Lauren at Brand Groupies, that really kind of pushed me into the podcast. They said, "Why don't you do a podcast? You can talk." And originally it was going to be about technology in architecture. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, but I don't know if I really have I can integrate that into something else. So we kind of sat down, and one of the things that came out of it was I'm always looking to improve the profession. I want to have an honest conversation. Like, what do architects do well, and what do we absolutely suck at? And how can we improve? And so it started, basically during the pandemic. I've been doing it for 3 years now. It's definitely very niche. It's grown. I think the most surprising thing of it is that originally my concept was I wasn't going to have a single architect on because I thought they'd be annoyed. Nobody's going to talk, bad about the profession. And then if you listen to the podcast, it's actually very positive. There's really no bashing of the people think because of the catchy name, like I'm bashing on architects.
I think I've listened. I think it's really good, actually.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so what I found was that other architects and engineers like to come on and really talk the same thing. Like, how do we improve the profession? There's a lot of things that need to be improved, whether it is actually use of technology or if it's talking to one another more or collaborating more on projects, right? Being able to give our clients a better project because maybe someone does an aspect of a project better than we do that. And rather than trying to hoard it all for ourselves and kind of doing not that great of a job, maybe we start to actually talk to one another more. Well, architect, I say on there, one thing that comes up all the time when I ask the question, what annoys you about architects is the whole thing about the fees, around our fees and around when we quote construction costs. Architects are terrible at telling the client how much something is going to cost. We are not good at that, and we should stop pretending that we are good at that. That's what gets us into trouble. And I think that's actually resonated with a lot of people, which is kind of cool. I hear that a lot. And also around fees, right? Asking for the appropriate fee. And sometimes if the client tells you, we can't afford you, okay, then you need to move on from that client, and that's okay. And it's good to hear other architects and engineers say, yeah, we probably should do that. Or maybe we come together as a group more and we start talking about look, this is what it takes to get your job done. We don't want to nickel and dime you. A lot of architects, a lot of engineers, we're in it for the love of this profession and the love of what we do. The money is good when it comes in. The money is good if we can get it. But that's not what motivates 90% of us. It really is the quality of the work and the relationships that we build.
And what's so nice about architecture and what I love about real estate, it's tangible. It's not like you made this amazing algorithm that's behind the scenes in some software program that you never get to see. You can drive by what you created and what you added to the community.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about real estate. And talking about that, to end this, I wanted to bring it up because we both live in an area where Netflix now is going to be doing a major project. Congratulations on being awarded a project like that.
Thank you.
Obviously, HBO, you saw how your past has enabled you to have that opportunity. But what's it feel like to be working on such a transformational project in the category of what you said now is more exciting for you, the bigger, the entertainment type projects, the unique ways to present that to the community, in your backyard, because that doesn't happen a lot.
No, and believe me, I think that's one of the things that put us over the edge. The experience that we have in terms of being able to do broadcast and stages and campus type projects and office type projects. The Netflix campus really encompasses all of the skill set we have. But most importantly, when we were interviewing with the client, and they're an amazing client, they I said to them, I grew up here. I literally grew up here. And this is in I can practically walk to the site from my house. And it's been something that I looked at for years. It was really blocked off as an actual army fort for the majority. And then when it opened up, I even still to this day, there's those big gates. I can't believe I can actually go through that section.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm
you
not,
always have to
dude.
make a right or a left.
I feel the same thing. It's wild.
Yeah, so it's exciting to be able to do that. We just got them site plan approval on the first phase, which is amazing. So that's all public now out there, which is great. There's another phase to come, and so we're working on the design of that, and it's going to be amazing for the community. I mean, it's going to be a real movie studio. I mean, it's not a tourist attraction. It's not, people aren't going to go there and do rides. It's not Warner Brothers or whatever. It's a real working movie studio, which is just going to be amazing for Monmouth County. Monmouth County is an extraordinary place, as you know. It's a place that, it's a small area in the middle of New Jersey that I would argue that it's the center of the world in some oddball way, right? We have a lot of things that happen here. A lot of amazing things happened on that fort. A lot of amazing things happened in the building that you're in Bell Works, which we also had worked on at one point. So it's exciting to be involved in something of that scale and literally in my backyard.
Well, it's Hollywood East. I feel that. It's going to be great for the community, great for jobs, great for things and other real estate projects spurring around it, right? You need more,
Absolutely.
Restaurants, all the cool stuff that make a community fun. And listen, Monmouth County, because the fort was here so long, and Bellworks obviously was, a big place for innovation, in AT&T, as that moved away, like we never really got the real replacement besides healthcare and things that are really throughout the entire state, to actually have a major industry in our central area of the state that's going to spur all sorts of other activity. If you look at Georgia and what happened to Georgia when, they entered the scene with, I guess, the incentives plan, that we have here, it's going to be fun. So congratulations on that. I want to thank you so much for doing this, and everyone's going to love this episode, so we appreciate it.
John, I can't thank you enough. I'll have to have you on mine. I'd love to talk, talk about architects and kind of how you, as the owner and developer, can see us, making a difference and improving. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate it, and for everything you've always helped me with. Well,
you too, my friend. It's mutual. All right, see ya. Hi, John Schultz here. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Would really appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Looking forward to being with you soon.